Hi, everybody. I would like to say afternoon on behalf of our president, Dr. Mustafa Aydın, the president of Eurasian Universities Union. And as General Secretary, I am authorized to lead this conference, which is about the African transit migration to Libya to Europe. And we try to discuss the human cost and how the Libyans, European Union, and other relevant stakeholders are dealing with this issue. In the first 5 months of 2021, around 600 people coming from Libya to Europe have lost their lives in the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, Libya is one of the most transit centers, transit countries for the migrants who want to flee to Europe because of the chaos in this country and because of the political rift and because of the crisis they are facing by themselves. This creates an atmosphere for those illegal organizations to traffic those people to Libya, to Europe, and of course, there are a lot of other crimes and also different behaviors against the immigrants because European Union doesn't want to accept them. It creates borders to them. It creates problems to get them in. And of course, Libya is one of the countries that is suffering the most. The issue cannot deal by itself with this entire big humanitarian problem. Today in the webinar conference, we have as guest Mr. Samer Gosby, the leader of the Foundation Sheikh Tahir Ankular Charity. In short, STACO. STACO is a member of United Nations Economic Council, has a consultant status. And we would like to ask from Samer, first of all, to explain us the real situation that they are facing as an old and powerful Libyan non-governmental organization, how their government is dealing with the issue, and in addition, how as an NGO, they try to settle this problem by themselves, and what they are looking from the international organizations, NGOs, and other stakeholders to assist them in order to prevent such an illegal migration from Libya and to alleviate the suffering of those people who are looking their future in Europe. I have the floor to Brother Samer Al-Gosby, and we would like to get his presentation. Your microphone, Brother Samer.
Hello. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا speak Arabic, Mr. Mudaffar. Speak Arabic, no problem.
Yeah, we'll translate it to English.
Okay.
السلام عليكم سيد سامر. أنا سأترجم للغة الإنجليزية.
وينك أنت في اللغة العربية ما ترجمتيش؟
لأن الميكروفون كان مغلق، فالآن سأقوم بالترجمة من اللغة العربية للغة الإنجليزية.
والعكس؟
طبعاً والعكس كذلك.
أوكي. نحن سعداء بالمشاركة في هذه الندوة اللي هي تتعلق بشؤون المهاجرين غير النظاميين في ليبيا والوضع الإنساني في ليبيا.
First of all, we're so glad to participate in this webinar because to talk about the problems that the immigrants have from in Libya.
الحقيقة في أقل من دقيقة ممكن نعرف بستاكو حتى يعرفها الإخوة المشاركين. ستاكو أنشئت في شهر أكتوبر 10/10/2011 وسنحتفل في 10 أكتوبر 2021 هذه السنة بذكرى مرور 10 سنوات على تأسيس ستاكو.
First of all, I want to explain about a little about our organization, Sheikh Al-Tahir Al-Zawi Charitable Organization. It's been found in the 10th October 2011, and in the 10th of October in this year we will have the 10th year of our organization.
الشيخ الطاهر الزاوي هو خريج الأزهر الشريف ومفتي ليبيا سابقا باختصار يعني، وهو مجاهد ومؤرخ ولغوي، يعتبر من الشخصيات الوطنية على مستوى ليبيا وعلى مستوى العالم الإسلامي.
الشيخ طاهر الزاوي, he's Al-Azhar University graduate, and he was a mufti in the Libyan government, and he's also a mujahid, and he's a very important human being in the charitable organizations in Libya and also in the world.
نحن من مدة أسبوع تحصلنا على الصفة الاستشارية في المجلس الثقافي الاقتصادي الاجتماعي في نيويورك. تحصلت ستاكو على الإيكوسوك الصفة الاستشارية.
We had the advisory capacity in the ECOSOC from a week ago.
وأيضا ستاكو تعتبر من أكبر الشركاء في ليبيا مع المنظمات الدولية WFP والIOM واليونيسيف والUNDP والWHO والDRC والAIM. كل هذه المنظمات نحن عملنا معها شراكات ونفذنا مشاريع لها في ليبيا.
Also, the Al-Sheikh Tahir Zawi Charitable Organization is the biggest partner in Libya, with the biggest NGOs in the world, as the International Organization of Migration, the World Lunch Program, and the other biggest organizations.
أريد أن نتكلم ونتحدث في هذه المشاركة والمداخلة على وضع المهاجرين في ليبيا. ووضعهم الحقيقة يعني يعتبر وضع صعب جدا وزاد صعوبة بعد COVID-19.
We want to speak now about the situation of the immigrants in Libya, and especially because it's a very, very bad situation, especially with COVID-19 striking up.
عدد المهاجرين الغير نظاميين الآن في ليبيا يتجاوز عددهم أكثر من 500,000 مهاجر في ليبيا، موزعين في شرق ليبيا وغرب ليبيا وجنوب ليبيا.
Now the number of immigrants in Libya is more than 500,000, spread all in Libya, north, west, south, and everywhere.
وجنسياتهم مختلفة من مالي والسنغال وغامبيا وأوغندا والنيجر ونيجيريا، يعني جنسيات مختلفة يعبرون الحدود. أكثر عبورهم يعتبر المنفذ الجنوبي، منفذ الكفرة أو منفذ التوم، على الحدود الليبية السودانية المصرية أو على الحدود الليبية النيجيرية.
And they are from several nationalities as Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Uganda, Niger, Nigeria, and the main ports for them is the south borders between especially Egypt and Libya, and also Niger and Libya.
أنا شخصياً زرت منطقة تيجرهي، وهي آخر منطقة في الجنوب الليبي، تبعد على طرابلس العاصمة تقريبا 1350 كيلو. هذه منطقة تجره. بعد المنطقة هذه منطقة صحراوية 300 كيلو صحراوية، بعدها منفذ التوم، هذا المنفذ البري بين ليبيا والنيجر. في 2016 أنا زرت هذه المنطقة من مدينة تجره.
I personally visited the south, the south of Libya, especially the part of Tijerbi. It's far from Trablus, from Trablus by 1,350 kilometers, and it's it's a place in desert, so the entry of the immigrants is so easy from that ways.
حقيقة أنا زيارتي لتجره يعني رأيت عربات المهاجرين غير النظاميين يصولون ويتجولون في الجنوب الليبي، وبدون يعني وجود أي يعني علامة لوجود الدولة الليبية أو الحدود أو حرس الحدود في ليبيا.
In my visit, I saw the irregular immigrants riding their cars, passing without any board guards members being there, or any present or any existence of the Libyan government or the board guards or anyone.
ووضحهم الحقيقة يعني هناك أعداد كبيرة جدا دخلت يعني من التبو، ودخلت وسيطرت على بعض الأماكن وعملت بوابات وهمية، ويعني هؤلاء غير ليبيين وليس لديهم الرقم الوطني الليبي، وهم يصلون ويجولون في الجنوب الليبي بكل أريحية، وهذا للأسف الشديد.
And the main problem that some of these irregular immigrants, they took control of some places in the border. They make some kind of ports, and they're starting to take control of the southern part of the Libyan country.
فالحقيقة نحن نعرف ليبيا. أنا شخصياً أيضاً زرت الكفرة ومساعد ونالوت وكل المناطق الحدودية نظراً لشغل ستاكو في كل ليبيا. فشغلنا في كل ليبيا جعلنا نزور كل المناطق الحدودية في ليبيا ومراكز الاحتجاز. نحن زرنا حتى مراكز الاحتجاز في منطقة القطرون.
As our work in the Sheikh Tahir Zawi charitable organization, we've went to all the borders in Libya, as the Kafra, Msaad, Talus, and the other cities in the borders. And we also visited the detention centers to see the situation and know about it.
أيضاً كنا اشتغلنا مع المنظمة الدولية للهجرة IOM، عاملنا معهم كشريك وقمنا بعلاج يعني مئات المهاجرين، علاجهم في المصحات الخاصة في ليبيا. وقدمنا يعني مع فريقنا الطبي قدمنا العديد من المساعدة في الرعاية الصحية والحماية للمهاجرين في ليبيا.
And we worked also as a partner to the IOM in these parts of Libya. So we gave these immigrants healthcare, and especially with private clinics. We worked with private clinics, and we tried to help them as possible as we can.
نحن تقريبا اشتغلنا مع يعني في 10 مركز احتجاز في ليبيا.
We worked approximately in 10 detention centers in the borders of Libya.
اشتغلنا في مركز احتجاز على سبيل المثال، يعني اكزامبل الكفرة في الجنوب الشرقي على الحدود الليبية السودانية المصرية. هذا مركز احتجاز في الكفرة، اشتغلنا معهم. واشتغلنا في شحات، هذا تبعد على بنغازي تقريبا 200 كيلو. واشتغلنا في مصراتة والزاوية والزوارة. هذا بعض المراكز الاحتجازية التي عملنا فيها لمدة سنوات.
For example, we worked in a detention center in Al-Kafra city, and it's in the southeast of Libya, in the borders between Libya and Egypt. And we worked also in other detention centers, for example, in Masrata, Zawiya, and other cities.
أيضا صينا مركز إيواء، مركز الاحتجاز في مدينة الزنتان مع اليونيسيف. وقمنا بصيانة مراكز الاحتجاز في طرابلس في طريق السكة مع منظمات إيطالية.
Also, we visited other detention centers in other cities, and we also made the maintenance of some of these detention centers with the Italian organization.
ويعني لازلنا نعمل في مشروع DTM، وهي مصفوفة تتبع النازحين والمهاجرين الIDPs والإميجريشن اللي في ليبيا. لازلنا نعمل مع المنظمة الدولية للهجرة في حصر عدد المهاجرين في ليبيا في 67 بلدية تقريبا.
We also still working about with the metrics of immigrants tracking the DDM in all the Libyan parts.
يعني في نهاية هذه المداخلة حتى لا أطيل، يعني استاكو يستطيعوا أن يدخلوا على الويب سايت ويعني وعلى الموقع المؤسسة ويطلعوا على نشاطاتها بشكل أكبر. ألو؟
So to not speak any longer, you can enter the website of the Sheikh Al-Tahir Al-Zawi Charitable Organization and see all the other work that we are doing in the Libya and all the help that we are given to the immigrants.
الآن عندنا مشروع مع منظمة إيطالية لعودة 350 مهاجر سيذهبون من ليبيا إلى إيطاليا.
من ليبيا إلى إيطاليا أو العكس؟
مع منظمة سانتا جيديو.
سانتا
جيديو.
And now we are having a project with the Italian organization, Santa Gidio, I guess the name, so they can help for كم عدد المهاجرين؟
350 مهاجر.
So they can help 350 immigrants to come back from Italy to Libya.
لكن الحقيقة نحن نوصي في هذه الندوة إلى توحيد الجهود المنظمات الدولية والمنظمات الوطنية غير الحكومية لتوحيد جهودها للعمل على يعني تخفيض عدد المهاجرين غير النظاميين من ليبيا إلى أوروبا. ونحن نفكر في إقامة مؤتمر دولي في ليبيا، وممكن تكون هذه مبادرة من ستاكو يتبناها الهلال الأحمر الأزرق والمنظمات الدولية المشاركة الآن، لتكون مؤتمر دولي يختص بدول المصدر اللي هي دول الأفريقية، ودول المعبر اللي هي ليبيا ومصر وتونس، ودول المقصد اللي هي الدول الأوروبية إيطاليا وأسبانيا واليونان.
And especially we would like to have the help and unify our forces as NGOs and organizations, so we could stop the immigrations from the African countries, especially the ones near to the border as Libya, Egypt, Tunis, and these countries, so we can stop the immigration from these countries to the European countries. And we would like even to hold an international conference with the help of International Blue Crescent and the other organizations here with us in this conference, so we can have a good and a better solution.
أقصد في هذا المؤتمر تناول العديد من المحاور، وأهمها هو الدفع بعملية دعم المنظمات الدولية وتنسيق عملها في ليبيا والمنظمات الغير حكومية، لأن الحقيقة يعني جهاز الهجرة غير الشرعية في ليبيا الذي يتبع رئاسة الوزراء يعاني من فساد كبير جدا وسرقة أموال المهاجرين في وجباتهم ومأكلهم ومشربهم في ليبيا. وهذا يتطلب تكثيف وتوحيد الجهود المنظمات الدولية والمنظمات الغير حكومية للضغط على الحكومة الليبية، وفي نفس الوقت لتوحيد الجهود وتنسيقها لتقديم أفضل خدمة للمهاجر، لأنه هو يعتبر ضحية المهاجر عندما يعبر من ليبيا أو من أي دولة أخرى ومتجه إلى أوروبا.
And in this conference, we would like to unite our forces so we can help the international organizations and the NGOs in Libya, so we can put a pressure on the Libyan government, because there is a lot of corruption, especially about this subject, the subject of immigrants. So there is a very huge amount of corruption. So they steal the money needed to be used to help these immigrants who are the ones in need for help, and they are the victim in this situation, because passing from the borders to Libya, and after that, while trying to pass from Libya and the other African countries to the European side, they face very huge problems.
عندما نتحدث على الفساد والكوربشن في ليبيا شيء لا يصدق في ملف الهجرة غير الشرعية.
كيف؟
عندما أتحدث على الفساد والكوربشن اللي موجود في ليبيا على ملف الهجرة غير الشرعية شيء لا يصدق، فساد كبير جدا.
He's telling again that the corruption amounts in the especially about this subject, about the immigrants, is a very huge corruption, and it's a bit of a subject that it's unbelievable, but it needs a very good solution.
هذا باختصار شديد الوضع في ليبيا. الوضع السياسي لا يزال معقد، وهذا يؤثر على عملياتنا الإنسانية داخل ليبيا.
Briefly, this is the situation inside of Libya, especially with the problems, the political problems having now, and this make our work a bit harder, and giving help to these people becoming a little bit harder.
ونأمل أن تتحسن الظروف السياسية في القريب العاجل في شهر ديسمبر القادم، وأن يجعل ذلك يعني حركتنا في عملياتنا الإنسانية أكثر سهولة وأكثر أمنا ويعني أكثر فاعلية.
And we wish that the political problems being solved in this December, so we can be safer and so we can give more help and be more effective.
يعني هذا باختصار، وأنا أشكركم جزيل الشكر، وأي سؤال أنا جاهز يعني للرد عليه حتى لا أطيل عليكم وأترك المجال إلى الزملاء. واعذروني أنا يعني عامل بنج، درت عملية صغيرة على سني، هذا ما يجعلني يعني ممكن بطيء الكلام، فآسف وأستسمحكم عذرا، وأنا سعيد جدا بسماع مداخلاتكم.
Thank you very much. And briefly, this is the situation in Libya, and I would like to answer any question that you have. And I'm so glad that for participating in this conference. And I'm so sorry because I had a little
overtime. Thank you, Brother Samir, for the information you provide about the situation in your country. And of course, we hope your country recovers politically and after the elections in December, and you have a political stability. Of course, as you mentioned, we need an international cooperation in order to tackle this migrant issue in Libya. And one of the main stakeholders that assists Libya to increase the capacity to respond to this migrant issue is International Organization for Migration, IOM, which whom you are partnering also in Libya. We have now Mr. Federico Soda, Chief of Mission of IOM in Libya as of September 9, 2019, and he is responsible for overseeing IOM's activities in the country, including humanitarian assistance, technical cooperation, capacity building, and community stabilization in order to enhance migration management systems in Libya. Of course, Mr. Federico is very much experienced on this migrant issue because between 2014 and 2019, he was the IOM's response along the Central Mediterranean route. Federico was the director of the IOM Coordination Office in the Mediterranean in Rome. We would like to have his opinion, his information on this webinar, which I believe that will be a great contribution to understand the concept from the international organization's aspect. Please, Mr. Federico, now is your time to submit us your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baca. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. And thank you to all the participants and speakers. I will follow up on the presentation by Mr. Samir, the representative from STACO. Indeed, we have a collaboration with STACO on the IOM Displacement Tracking Matrix, which is a global tool for data collection and basically the monitoring and analysis of migration flows. And I'm going to be relying on the data from this activity of ours in Libya in the course of my presentation. I don't know if it's possible to put the PowerPoint that I've shared with the organ. Thanks. So let me start by saying that there are a few very important elements that would be good if we could take away today from migration dynamics in Libya. First of all, you can go to the next slide, please. First of all, there are about 575,000 migrants in Libya. This is actually quite a sharp reduction from the number that were in Libya, let's say a year ago, pre-COVID, which was nearly 100,000 more. So the COVID pandemic has had, I think, an important downward pressure on the stock of migrants in the country, probably due to the slowdown in the economic activity, the lockdowns that all countries have been subject to, and Libya was no exception. And we suspect that many migrants from neighboring countries who are able to move quite easily across the borders probably left and will return when the economic opportunities resume. Now, what's important about that number of the 575 is that, as you can see from the bar graphs below, a substantial majority is from neighboring countries of Niger, Egypt, Sudan, and Chad. And this is also significant because most of them, and this is what the more detailed map shows, most of them are can be found basically in bordering areas to their respective countries. So in the south west, we'll find a lot of Niger nationals, in the southeast, a lot of Chadians, and up in the northeast, a large representation of Egyptians. The northwest is actually quite well represented by all these four different nationalities. And again, what's significant about these four nationalities is that with the exception probably of Sudan, they are not nationalities that we tend to see attempting to cross the Mediterranean or indeed reaching the other side. So these are clearly migrants from countries that are moving to Libya for work, are able to find work, and basically that they stay if the conditions permit, and they in a quite fluid way are return or don't come if the conditions don't allow. Let's go to the next slide now. And the next slide is basically the migration routes. You can see, quite clearly, and I think maybe it's quite logical where the entry points are, the main entry points for migrants coming from either the south west, other parts of West Africa, which probably collectively represent about 20 to 25% of the migrants, or from the south east, Sudan and beyond, down to the, let's say, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia triangle, which represent also a small minority. And you can see that the majority of migrants in Libya are sub-Saharan Africa. Included in this grouping are Niger, Chad, and Sudan, which is why it is such a large percentage. And then just over a third, 35% from North Africa. This is a mix primarily of Egyptians and Tunisian nationals. Next slide, please. So now, as I said, these nationalities are predominantly not ones that we see attempting to cross or cross. What we see indeed are the smaller minority of nationalities, as I mentioned, from West Africa and from East Africa, which I haven't talked about much yet. These migrants tend to be the ones that are both taken back by the Libyan Coast Guard when they are rescued or intercepted, or indeed, if we were to look at the data from the European side, in Italy and Malta specifically, we would see large numbers represented by West African and East African nationals beyond Chad, Niger, and Sudan. So a little bit further to the southwest and a little bit further to the southeast of those countries. You can see from the graph that we have been, there are historical figures that go back a lot longer than this, But if we go back to, let's say, the most recent history, then you can see that we had significant peaks. These are the numbers of deaths in the Mediterranean. We had peaks in 15, 16, 17. This is 3 years when between 400,000 and 500,000 migrants successfully reached the European shores. And then over the last few years, both a reduction in the number of deaths and the number of crossings, in particular last year, reaching, I think, a recent low in both the number of deaths and the numbers of successful crossings. This year, you can see already, even though it's only the beginning of June, we are seeing a peak already. We have a peak as well in the number of people that have been taken back to Libya by the Libyan authorities, picked up at sea and taken back. We're over 10,000 for the year, which compares to 12,000 for all of 2020. So if we keep going at this rate, we're going to, maybe get to 20 or more than 20,000 people that will have been rescued or intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard, taken back to Libya. And we see also the numbers on the Italian side and the Maltese side going up. So historically, we've maybe in very short history, but maybe we've hit a little bit of a low in the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020. And 2021 is proving to be quite a difficult and dangerous year for migrants, and also in general for the management of this situation and this phenomenon. Next slide, please. I've already talked a little bit about this slide, and you can see more precisely what I was referring to. In 2020, about almost 12,000 returned to Libya, and in 2021, well, these are a few days old. We're even higher than that now. As you can see from the breakdown that we're able to provide, we have a very, very large percentage of men. They are predominantly men of adult age, young, and mostly between the ages of 18 and mid-20s. The number of women is significant because of the much higher risk that women are, particularly of sexual exploitation and abuse and gender-based violence. And then you can see the number of minors, which is also an important. It doesn't compare to the other two, but clearly, a very, very high risk group that we pay particular attention to. And then in the top right, you can see the number of deaths and missing. Deaths, we differentiate between dead and missing. Dead, we only count those that we can account for with actual bodies or remains, whereas the missing are people that we suspect embarked and were never seen again, and were victims of accidents or shipwrecks. Next slide, please. Now, this is an issue that's not maybe not directly related to today's subject, but I think an important one, and one that we should not overlook, because while we talk a lot about mobility to Libya and from Libya, we talk a lot less about the situation of IDPs, internally displaced persons in Libya. And it's an important area of IOM's work. It's an important area of focus for the government and for NGOs and UN agencies. And there's some good news here for sure. You can see that the blue number is, and the blue number and the blue graphs are the number of people currently displaced within Libya. So Libyans displaced in Libya. And the green is the number of people that were displaced but have returned to their communities. And the fact that the graph ends at the end of last year and the beginning of this year with these two lines going in basically opposite directions is a very, very good sign. It means that more people are returning to the communities of origin, and the number of those displaced is going down. And you can see that it's going down quite quickly. And it's not a coincidence that it begins to fall when the violence inside the country subsided in the middle of last year, and continues to fall through the period of this ceasefire in the late fall and the improving stability that we continue to see today. So definitely some very difficult issues around this population of IDPs in Libya, in terms of some communities not being ready, being seriously damaged, the lack of access to services and so on. But probably overall a pretty good future, a pretty good current period that we're working in terms of an improving situation. Now, next slide, please. Our programming in Libya, I would describe as two-tracked. There is, of course, a continuing and quite serious humanitarian situation and areas, what I call areas, pockets of acute vulnerability, where we are required to respond to immediate needs. This can be related to those that are taken back to Libyan shores by the Libyan Coast Guard, and we're at the disembarkment points there to provide humanitarian assistance. It's also something that's very, very important in relation to the detention centers and the conditions in detention, which I won't go into detail now, but are very well documented as being totally unacceptable, and in many cases putting people's lives at risk, or indeed many people have died in detention. So these are the two areas where we will continue to focus, and where the humanitarian response is fundamental. And then another track, which is much, much broader and much hopefully longer term, and related to sustainable migration management and governance. And this is areas that we work in relation to labor migration, better border management, so secure borders for safe, legal, and orderly mobility. Migrant health is an important part of this response, because we are working with mobile populations on fighting tuberculosis, of course, on the COVID response as well, for both migrants and Libyans. And then generally activities related to the improvement of stability and the delivery of services to restore normality in the social and economic lives of Libyan communities, and in particular Libyan communities that host migrants. We work with a wide range of partners. As I said, I was glad to see that Stako is on the program today. They work with us on the DTM data collection. We work with other national NGOs and international NGOs, and then of course with the whole of the UN system. And while IOM's work is the broadest in terms of migration issues in Libya, of course, other more specialized partners are involved in a number of these areas, be it health with some of the NGOs like MSF, or UN agencies like WHO, and then specific children's and women's issues with UNICEF in particular. And for example, we do food assistance in partnership with the World Food Programme. So the system works quite well. The community of NGOs is small. It is small both at the international level, and also it is quite small at the national level in terms of NGOs with good capacities to manage funds and implement activities. So this is something that has disadvantages, but also it has advantages because it makes coordination much easier, and it's a fairly close community of partners, both at the national and international level of actors. Of course, the hope is that we will see these two tracks really, change balance. Over the last few years, the humanitarian track of response has been the predominant one, with very little possibility to work on migration governance and basically migration systems to manage the flows. As the situation improves, we are seeing the humanitarian needs slowly lessen, and we have more and more space to work with the authorities on the hard migration governance issues, which are going to be really the way out of this very complicated and difficult situation that I would describe as Libyan migration dynamics. So this is part of our strategy to move more and more to the governance, and to hopefully have a situation in Libya where humanitarian assistance is either not necessary or a very, very small part of the work. Thank you again for your attention, and again to Mr. Baca for the invitation and for letting me speak. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Federico Soda. Thank you for the great presentation you provided. Of course, until now, we got the opinion of the local NGOs from Brother Samir and from the international organizations like the International Organization for Migration. Migration issue is one of the basic problems that European Union southern countries, municipalities are facing, because most of those migrants are coming to their provinces, to their cities, and they need to tackle with this issue in a deep way, in a very serious way. Otherwise, the local communities are increasing, the local communities hate increasing, and a lot of conflicts between the local communities and the migrants are increasing. This Standing Committee for Humanitarian Partnership, COPEM, is an organization based in Palermo and having as members around 200 municipalities and local authorities all over the MENA region, North Africa and Middle East and European Union region. This is one of the organizations that seriously is taking care about this migrant issue and is developing policies against the migration, to tackle the migration issue and increase the capacity of the local authorities in order to overcome this big humanitarian problem. Foreign Minister of Italy, and to give us the information about the situation from the aspect of the governments and the European Union in this issue. Emanuele Del Rey is Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, Italian scholar, sociologist, and expert in conflict studies, migration, refugees issues, minorities, religious phenomena. She has carried out long researches on field in conflict areas and areas in transition since 1990, following the social, political, economic transformation of countries and regions such as the Balkans, the Caucasus, North Africa, and the Middle East and other regions. She is founder of EPOS, International Mediating and Negotiating Operational Agency, active in conflict areas with projects for the reconstruction of the civil society, member of the scientific committee and editing board, and regular contributor of various leading scientific magazines, including Lime's Italian Geopolitical Review. She is the director of the book series Global Political long. Panelist and speaker in many international fora, member of numerous think tanks, institutes, and organizations, author of a vast number of scientific essays and volumes, and director of documentaries. He has been international electoral observer for the United Nations, EU, OSCE in more than 15 missions. Latest publications of Mrs. Del Rey is Women and Borders, Refugees, Migrants, and Communities in 2018. Hello, Mrs. Del Rey. Good afternoon. Your microphone is not operating. Can you click the microphone?
I just said I just arrived from the
parliament. I know. Let me to summarize what we have done until now. We got the presentation of a Libyan NGO, STACO. The director of the Libyan NGO, Mr. Samer Al-Gozbi, provided us with information about the situation on the Libyan NGO side and how they are dealing with this migration issue. Then we had Mr. Federico Soda, the chief of mission of IOM in Libya, and he provided us with feedback about all the issues, all the figures, and what international organizations in leadership of IOM they are doing in Libya in order to promote the capacity of this country to deal with this migrant issue. And then now we would like to get your opinion about the European Union policies, how they are dealing with this issue, and what is their aspect, their point of view on this migration issue. Because as we know, mainly the European Union countries, especially the southern countries, are suffering badly from this migration problem.
Thank you very much, sir. I find this discussion particularly interesting because it offers me the opportunity to share some of my views, especially views that I have acquired not only as a scholar working in Confiteros for many years, but also as a politician in my position of Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. And let's say at the eve of my new position, which will be a special representative of the European Union for the Sahel. As you know, it will start soon. I would like to start from the last sentence you just pronounced, the fact that Europe is suffering badly from the migration flows. I would like to, if you allow me, correct this a bit, because as you know, the numbers are not particularly worrying, despite the fact that, of course, I would put it in another way, the trip that the migrants take to come to Europe, to reach our shores, are so dangerous that we have many loss of lives. And of course, this shows us that the situation in the countries of origin is so unbearable that people are still obliged to choose to migrate, despite the fact that the trip is particularly risky. This is something I want to point out because honestly, I think that the European Union will always have, as it has had in the past for centuries, migration movements. And therefore, it is the time to think about this issue, not only as an emergential problem requiring emergency responses, but as an issue that we have to live with, and we have to be able to manage in a positive way, making sure that we, on one hand, avoid being pressured as countries of welcoming too much by migration flows, and at the same time that, of course, countries of origin take their own responsibilities, and people are not obliged anymore to make these kind of choices in a way that would create, of course, problems for the migrants, so much that they would lose their lives. In this sense, in my experience as Deputy Minister, I can tell you that I have experienced not only, of course, the new policies that are being put in place. For instance, Italy is the only country so far that has been carrying out evacuations from the detention camps in Libya, which shows that beside having to face the people arriving in our own country, and then, of course, negotiating with the European Union for a different policy regarding migration, we have taken the responsibility and we have applied the principle that also implies the respect for human rights and understanding that certain practices are unacceptable by all means, whatever this would cost for us. On the other hand, I can tell you that finally, and I want to talk about the positive aspects, we have managed also to develop alternative ways of facing the issue of migration, and also thinking about the future in strategies that can be really effective, that can bring real changes to the mentality of the welcoming countries, namely the European Union, but also in the countries of origin, where they, of course, are called to take the responsibility to cooperate for a better management of this issue. I can tell you that, for instance, I take one country that I consider particularly cooperative, despite all the huge difficulties that they face in their own territory, is Niger. Niger, I have to say, has been really cooperating with us very, very positively. We have managed to not only to put in place a wonderful scheme of cooperation between multilateral organizations, namely IOM or UNHCR, and civil society, which is particularly lively there, not only the civil society of the country itself, but also, of course, international civil society working in the country, and also, of course, institutions, because institutions such as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but as well as others, of course, create, together with the other two, multilateral dimension and also civil society, create a very virtuous circle of awareness that will pay in the future. Because I really think that the only way by which we can face this problem is to promote development, but not development once again in a sense of emergency. We are able, of course, as being rich countries and leaders in many sectors of the market and also of culture, we are able to respond to emergencies, also climate crisis or, of course, security issues with our own resources, and also respond with an emergency strategy that can somehow calm down the problem for the time being. What we are aiming at the moment, seriously, is to make sure that development is truly sustainable. And this is the reason why we are focusing, not only Italy, but the European Union in general, focusing really very much on the development of a positive and effective governance that would make sure that the communities of the countries of origin or transit of migration flows are able to develop their own skills, their own resources, internal resources, whether economic resources or human resources, which are a fantastic capital, especially in Africa, so much that the situation can change. I think that this could be something that we should see in the future. There are opportunities for the European Union now being what I call, let's say, still the moral authority at the global level, because we still are the area in which we try as much as possible to promote human rights and real respectful policies for the human beings. I think that it's about time that we develop new policies. One policy I want to talk about is humanitarian corridors, for instance, as well as circular migration and others. But humanitarian corridors, for instance, are a good way of facing the problem. You know that it is an Italian initiative, and I'm trying to transform it into a European initiative. I hope that I will be able to do so, especially with the support of many countries that believe in this kind of alternative ways, and especially alternative views. So I just conclude by saying, we have to be careful not to be taken by emotional reactions to the phenomena, stick to the numbers which are manageable, but look at the phenomena as a phenomenon that must be addressed not with emergency policies, but with structural responses that correspond to strategies, alternative strategies, and of course based on mutual interest and mutual responsibility. The European Union is going in this direction, and I just conclude by saying that not by chance we now call all the countries of origin and transit of migration flows partners, and this is I think in itself as a concept particularly relevant, especially in the issue of migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Del Rey. Thank you for the great contribution you done. It gave a good picture for us regarding the European Union approach and your counter approach. Now let's go again to Standing Committee of Euro-Mediterranean Cooperation, COPEM, which is, has around 200 members from all over European Union, Middle East, and North Africa countries, mainly municipalities. And we know that the municipalities are the organizations that we are facing mostly this migrant issue, because it's creating different problems for their own communities, and it is a burden for their capacities also. In addition, they need to look to the problem on a humanitarian view, and they need to take care about to avoid conflicts between the host people and the migrants. We have Mr. Francesco Samaritano now on the floor. He's the General Secretary of COPEM, and we would like to get his opinion because he's also based in Palermo. Sicily is one of the main regions that facing this migrant issue deeply in his society. Yes, Mr. Francesco, we would like to get your views, and now the floor is yours.
Francesco, a te traduco io, non ti preoccupare. Sì, devi solo attivare il microfono.
Ok. Allora, grazie a tutti voi, saluto tutti i relatori. Un grazie al dottor Bascia per avermi invitato a questo interessante incontro, a questa interessante conferenza. Devo dirvi che ho ascoltato con attenzione già la relatrice che mi ha preceduto e che ha fornito già tutta una serie di informazioni e di dati di cui io conoscevo l'esistenza.
Ricordati che devo tradurre.
Vai.
Sorry. So I will translate for Mr. Samaritano. He thanks, of course, all the speakers and thanks Mr. Basha for the invitation. He has been hearing with a lot of attention the speech that was before his one. And so.
Vorrei ringraziare ancora di più il dottor Bascia, non lo faccio solo nella qualità di segretario generale. Lo faccio anche nella veste di immigrato di 25esima generazione. Infatti, sicuramente un samaritano dalla Samaria, secoli e secoli fa, si è spostato in Europa e lì è nato un nuovo ceppo etnico. Tutto questo lo dico perché non ci vuole molto a capire che noi europei non facciamo altro e non siamo altro che la rappresentazione di varie etnie che si sono nel tempo mescolate.
So, I thank again Mr. Basha, not only as Secretary General of COPEM, but as immigrant of 25th generation, because I am sure that a Samaritano from Samaria displaced once in Europe. So we as Europeans, we also have several roots.
Ho voluto sottolineare questo perché spesso la questione migratoria si mescola purtroppo con la questione razzista. E io credo che sia un'aberrazione per noi europei poter parlare di razzismo. Gli Gli antichi insegnavano che il Mediterraneo nasce fin dove cresce l'ulivo, ed è questo il tratto identitario del continente che io chiamo Euro-Mediterraneo. Ilia, vai. Ilia?
Yeah, we as Europeans, he doesn't agree that much to mix the topic of migration with the racism in Europe. And we are ancient people. Mediterranean continues while trees of olive oil are in place. So it's something that we share on both coasts.
È che noi europei siamo coinvolti emotivamente da quello che succede nel mondo arabo, lo si è visto con la famosa primavera, la primavera araba, che tutti i network, tutti i ragazzi e le ragazze, molti ragazzi e molte ragazze, molti studenti europei attraverso i network hanno vissuto questi accadimenti, e sperando che poi tutto ciò portasse ad un ulteriore riavvicinamento da parte delle nuove generazioni dei paesi arabi a quelle nostre europee.
So feelings are involved in this issue with the Arab Spring. All the networks of young people that lived that period were hoping that there would be finally an approach between Arab young people and European young people at the end.
Quali sono le paure che oggi vivono gli europei? Quei famosi europei, quei cosiddetti sovranisti, quei cosiddetti nazionalisti. Sono due le paure che stanno innescando. Una, la paura di perdere i connotati culturali dell'Europa. La seconda è un'altra paura ancora più atavica, che è quella che l'immigrazione genera povertà nelle comunità indigene. Per quel che riguarda la prima, io ovviamente da italiano, da europeo, sono fiero di Dante, di Shakespeare, di Mozart, di Beethoven. Credo che però la nostra cultura possa essere arricchita da quella araba, dai contatti con quella araba, come del resto da quella ebraica, come tutto ciò è avvenuto già nel XII secolo. Le culture arabe, ebraiche ed europee si sono arricchite nel contatto continuo, mantenendo la loro dignità e la loro diversità. Quindi che ci possa essere una paura di una commistione culturale che possa, come dire, in parte inficiare quelli che sono i valori europei, mi sembra una cosa del tutto assurda e del tutto immotivata.
So there are two main fears involved in this phenomena, and something that is linked with the nationalisms that are developing in Europe. The two fears are, first of all, the fear to lose the characteristic to be European, and the fear of nationalists. Migration, and the other fear is that migration can create poverty in indigenous communities. But even if I'm proud of the heritage that Europeans have from Dante, Shakespeare, Beethoven, this could be only enriched by Arab, Hebrew, and by Arab and Hebrew culture mixing with the European culture.
Qual è l'altra paura che si è innescata? È la paura economica. Alcuni europei temono che le ondate migratorie possano danneggiare i mercati europei, possano mettere a rischio i loro posti di lavoro. Quindi gli immigrati non vengono viste come delle persone sfortunate che vengono qui a cercare occasioni e opportunità migliori per la loro famiglia, ma quasi come dei nostri nemici che bisogna assolutamente respingere. Vedete, questo sentimento di paura gioca purtroppo in questo momento in vari strati della popolazione europea. Io quando parlo del fenomeno migratorio da un punto di vista istituzionale non parlo mai solo della questione relativa ai profughi, parlo anche della questione relativa a coloro che rischiano la vita insieme magari ai loro figli per venire qui in Europa per avere delle opportunità di vita migliori, sia da un punto di vista economico che anche da un punto di vista professionale. E credo che quando si affronta il problema della migrazione bisognerebbe guardarlo, ecco, a largo raggio, non limitarlo solo alla questione dei rifugiati politici.
So another fear is the fear about the economic field. Some Europeans feel that migrant flows can create a damage for the market of work in Europe. So they don't see immigrants as people who are trying to improve their situation, but they see immigrants as enemies. And this fear is, we can find it in several levels of European society. I would like to stress that while speaking about migrants, I don't want to speak just about refugees, but also about economical migrants, people who came here or would like to come here with the hope to improve their situation and the situation of their families.
Oggi siamo...
Spazio, Ilaria.
Ah, ok, perfetto.
Allora, oggi siamo con questa pandemia che ha colpito il mondo, siamo ad un'ulteriore svolta. E sarebbe facile e un po' demagogico dire che bisogna ovviamente accogliere tutti gli immigrati che arrivano qui, ma già negli anni 90 dei leader europei, tutto ciò che è accaduto negli anni 80 e 90, già alcuni leader europei lo avevano già immaginato, e cioè che ci sarebbe stata un'ondata migratoria che avrebbe portato sia profughi per motivi politici o per motivi bellici, sia profughi per motivi economici a cercare nuove sponde in Europa. E da lì si era prospettato già da allora la possibilità di interventi attraverso la cooperazione allo sviluppo, e cioè anziché spendere, come oggi l'Unione Europea fa, miliardi di euro per, perdonatemi il termine, mettere delle pezze a tutto quello che accade attorno al mondo della migrazione, se questi soldi fossero investiti in strutture universitarie, strutture culturali, dando agli enti locali dei paesi del Corno d'Africa, per esempio, come del Maghreb e del Medio Oriente, io credo che questa potrebbe essere una delle soluzioni per la quale molti immigrati deciderebbero di non venire qui. Io credo che se vengono qui in Europa non vengono per il puro piacere di venire, ma vengono perché spinti purtroppo dalle necessità, perché penso che se ne starebbero meglio a casa se avessero garantito un posto di lavoro e un luogo dove poter vivere dignitosamente.
Okay. Today, this pandemic has pushed us in a further step. Today is too simple saying let all the people come and enter Europe. But it's true that decades ago, some European leaders had already imagined the situation. Had already imagined that a wave of refugees for political or economical reasons would reach Europe. And they imagine to spend money for development cooperation and not to try to stop people coming. If we improve the investment in the development cooperation, investment in the Maghreb, Sub-Saharan Africa, or in Middle East, creating conditions for people to remain at home, I think that people would prefer to invest in their own countries, to spend their own lives in their own countries, and not to cross the Mediterranean in a very dangerous conditions to reach Europe.
Poi diciamolo con molta franchezza, negli anni passati si era discusso molto della famosa area di libero scambio euro-mediterranea, un'occasione straordinaria, a mio avviso unica, per creare un mercato comune che avrebbe promosso la cooperazione e la collaborazione in settori come l'agricoltura, il turismo, la pesca, le energie alternative, e che avrebbe dato occasioni di sviluppo e di maggiore opportunità ai mercati del Maghreb e del Medio Oriente. Poi, per delle scelte ovviamente comunitarie, forse lo sguardo è stato rivolto più verso l'Europa, verso i paesi dell'est che verso il sud. E io credo che questo sia stato un grosso errore da parte dell'Unione Europea.
Okay, let me honest. In the last decades, in Europe, we discussed about free exchange area for a common market area, and for improving cooperation in fishing, agriculture, and other key sectors. It would be an occasion for development of the southern shore, but at the end, for other political choices from Europe, decided to invest in the Eastern Europe more than in the southern shore, and I think it was a big mistake.
A pochi centinaia di metri da dove vi sto parlando scorre il Convitato di Pietra, cioè il Mar Mediterraneo. Mi auguro che quest'anno non accada quello che è accaduto negli anni passati, e cioè che questo mare, soprattutto in estate, diventi un mare di dolore, di tristezza e di morte. Questo mare che è stato simbolo di cultura, che è stato simbolo di scambi, di dialogo, che oggi purtroppo è stato e diventa, soprattutto in estate, un cimitero. Io ora mi chiedo come mai le città, le regioni, i governatorati, gli enti come il COPEM non vengano coinvolti nei tavoli comunitari, nei tavoli delle istituzioni europee, per ciò che riguarda le decisioni da intraprendere sul tema dell'immigrazione. Io credo che le regioni frontaliere possano giocare un grande ruolo, sia per l'esperienza che hanno e perché sono i primi ad accogliere questi immigrati e sono i primi a poterli gestire, a gestire sicuramente meglio, e non come si è fatto fino ad oggi, con provvedimenti di tampone che sono frutto solo di scelte estemporanee. E credo che questo sia uno degli aspetti più gravi e più drammatici. Pensate che nell'isola di Lampedusa l'anno scorso in un solo hotspot erano ammassati migliaia di immigrati con un solo servizio igienico. Io credo che l'Europa non possa dare questo tipo di risposte a questa gente. Non credo che questo sia esempio di grande civiltà e di grande accoglienza. Ilaria.
Yeah, okay. Close to my office, the Mediterranean Sea is streaming. I hope that this summer it not became, as usual, a sea of dead asymmetry, and not a place of exchanges, just like it was in the past. I question why local authorities and international international networks of local authorities, just like COPEM, are not involved in the reflection on migration, when local authorities and consistent networks have the right experience, have the direct experiences about management of migrations, management of integration. Last year in Lampedusa Island, thousands of people were gathered in a hotspot with only one toilet. I think it was not an example of a civilization.
Io credo che continuare ad operare con la politica di blocco in Libia di tutti questi immigrati e pur di non farli arrivare in Europa, farli vivere in quelle condizioni che a mio avviso sono inumane, non credo che sia una politica che alla fine pagherà. Come per esempio, non sono ancora riuscito a capire dopo tanti anni perché l'Unione Europea ha aperto l'agenzia Frontex che riguarda l'immigrazione, perché l'ha aperta in Polonia, con tutto il rispetto ovviamente per i polacchi, e non l'ha aperta qui in Sicilia, in Italia o in altre regioni frontaliere. Non è uno spirito di campanilista, o in altre regioni frontaliere del Mediterraneo dove più si avverte questo fenomeno migratorio. Io credo che due sono gli interventi, a mio avviso, che si dovrebbe fare, e cioè il primo l'ho già in sintesi detto, e cioè anziché spendere, investire su soluzioni raffazzonate senza una programmazione seria, ecco, aprire un tavolo di confronto coinvolgendo anche le città, le regioni euro-mediterranee, e poi soprattutto riprendere con la politica di cooperazione allo sviluppo, aprire dei mercati comuni, insomma cercare di portare quei paesi ad una programmazione con gli aiuti e con gli interventi sia dell'Unione Europea sia di altri organismi internazionali, per far sì che vi sia un vero e proprio sviluppo non solo da un punto di vista sociale ed economico, ma anche da un punto di vista culturale. Poi, sulla questione migratoria, il dottor Bascia come il professor Aydin sono molto sensibili a questo tema che il COPEM vuole riprendere con forza. In Europa abbiamo avuto gli esempi dell'Erasmus, cioè di scambi fra istituti scolastici, di ragazze e di ragazzi che approfondiscono gli studi spostandosi in altre città europee. Il COPEM perseguirà con forza questo obiettivo, però estendendolo a ragazze e ragazzi di istituti scolastici dei paesi del Maghreb, del Medio Oriente e di Israele. Io credo che alla base di una possibile di una potenziale realizzazione di un continente euro-mediterraneo non possa esserci che l'entusiasmo, la voglia da parte delle nuove generazioni. Io credo che debba essere questo l'obiettivo di tutti e quindi io credo che anche questo possa essere essenziale per cercare di gestire meglio questo fenomeno migratorio che ancora oggi purtroppo non vede soluzioni, non dico definitive, ma delle soluzioni che possano porre fine a quell'eccidio che ogni estate si verifica puntualmente nelle coste mediterranee.
Okay. I believe that the ongoing politics aiming at stop migrants in Libya is not a successful policy. I'm questioning why the European Union, has based Frontex in Poland, with all my respect for Poland, and not in the border regions where migration pressure is higher. I think that we need to start investment involving in the reflection local authorities, we need to create common markets. We have to impulse further development cooperation. And about migration issue, I know that Mr. Basha and Mr. Aydin are very sensitive to the topic. In Europe, we have the Erasmus program, and we as COPEM, we would like to extend to young people from Turkey, from Israel, from the MENA region, such a program for the creation of a Euromed continent. And in order to do this, we need the enthusiasm from new generations. And also in order to try to manage the migration phenomenon and to stop the death into the Mediterranean.
La politica, l'Europa, la politica istituzionale europea che auspicavano, che sognavano Adenauer, Schuman, De Gasperi, era una politica che doveva portare ad un'istituzione che privilegiava e che metteva al centro l'uomo. Ma quello che sta succedendo oggi pone al centro l'uomo o pone al centro gli interessi di grandi gruppi industriali, delle più grandi multinazionali? È questo che ogni giorno mi chiedo. Vi ringrazio.
Okay, Europe and its politics, as Schumann's like Schuman, De Gasperi dreamt, was a politic focused on men and women, focused on people. But now it seems that European politics is focused on multinational enterprises in their interest and business. And we needed to think about this and reshape our objective. Thank you.
Mikrofonunuz kapalı Muzaffer Bey.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you for the great contribution you did. Especially, I share the idea to provide investment to the southern countries to develop their capacities and to make more attractive for the local people their countries instead of looking for solutions in the European Union or to taking temporary measures. This is very good idea, and I hope all the politicians to share the same. Now I wanted to go to Ilia Mazzone, the International Relations Director of COPEM, and especially I'm curious to get this documentary in order to give us an idea about the humanitarian tragedy that those migrants are facing. Ilia?
Yes, I'm here with you, and I'm trying to connect with Sabina also, because the documentaries we produced, the short version, they were a bit heavy. We tried to transfer them to you, but let me see if you received it.
Elia, we will start it right now. We got, but not the new one, which is the subtitles for the Italian one. Yeah, the old one.
You received both the two news. If you can check your email, but it needs some time to download it. So I will start with my speech meanwhile.
Sure, of course. While you will do that, maybe we will get it.
Okay. So you can leave the video and then I speak if you prefer.
As you wish.
Okay, you can play.
You can run the video, yeah. What about the sound?
I think we don't hear the sound.
It is open.
Sabina, we don't hear the sound.
Yeah, I think it's a problem with the Zoom system.
Ilya, you can continue your speech, please, but we will try to check with the IT department again.
Okay. So, first of all, Mr. Basha, thank you again for inviting us, for involving COPEM into this interesting webinar. Here from Sicily, we observed what I call the tip of the iceberg of clandestine migration. So we all know that thousands of immigrants die in the Mediterranean Sea each year. Several years ago, in 2013, the world was shocked by the shipwreck of a boat that was sailing from Libya, from Misrata, to the Italian island of Lampedusa. And there more than 360 deaths were reported. This was broadcasted all over the world. I remember very well that moment as we were closing the EU-founded project called For Most of It, I Have No Words. And one of his main outputs was a visual campaign through a photographic exhibition. And the production of the documentary Clandestine Destiny on the risks of illegal migration routes in the Mediterranean. What happened after that tragedy? Deaths in the Mediterranean began to lose impact among the international audience. And most of the innocent lives drowned between Libya and the coast of Sicily remained without identity and were soon forgot. And it's the same thing that's happening, as you said at the beginning, again and again. As I said, I tend to call this stretch of sea just as the iceberg tip of a wider tragedy that is occurring, as some images show now, when we speak now in the Libyan prisons and beyond in the Sahara Desert. Working at the documentary, I had the opportunity to collect testimonies from immigrants that have crossed these dreadful routes. And I was really shocked, and I collected also some testimonies from some outstanding people that spent their life in helping the so-called illegal immigrants to survive once arrived in Sicily. So I will try to share again a short sequence. Let me see if it works now. But otherwise, I will tell you a little bit what's about. Share screen. No, it's not working. So it's a problem from WeTransfer. Okay, so you were seeing a couple of people coming from Sudan, and their testimony showed that while crossing the desert, they really suffered, and a lot of people died. The brother of the Sudanese migrant that we shortly saw in the video, he died as well. And but happens, the most shocking thing is how can't you feel lost in the desert?
Segnato da cadaveri in putrefazione e scheletri. quello indica la strada che porterà certamente nei posti giusti da dove si entra, dove la polizia...
I'm hearing some audio. What's the most shocking thing? There's no route, of course, in the deserts, and but there's no way that immigrants coming from sub-Saharan countries in Africa can get lost, because they just have to follow the path marked by dead bodies and skeletons, and this indicates the way to the right entry points where they have access to Libya finally. And during the travel, where they spent lots of days, women pay their ticket by being raped. And if it's true that some laws, some agreements that are made between states let less immigrants leave from Libya, it's also true that we can imagine what's happening in the southern borders of African countries. It's really what some testimony call the genocide of a continent. We can try to collect some partial numbers about this huge problem. IOM estimated 3 years ago that 600,000 migrants in Libya could be maybe victims of abuse and human rights violation due to the very difficult situation that Libya was suffering during the war. And the situation of immigrants worsened during the actual COVID-19 pandemic, of course. Children have not been spared. Of course, the panelists coming from Libya here can know better than those testimonies what's really happening in Libya, but UNICEF said that more than 1,000 of children were living in overcrowded detention centers in precarious conditions. So what happens? Bilateral agreements, paradoxically, worsen the situation because thousands of migrants have been intercepted and returned to Libya this year, but the rule is that they end up in detention centers that, of course, have not the capacity to host so much people that are guilty just of, as Mr. Samaritano said, the will to improve their life, or as Mr. Basha said, they are escaping from war situation, from poverty. So I was starting 13 years ago to document what's going on in the Mediterranean region and beyond, on the borders of Libya and the Nubic desert. But as Mr. Basha said, the situation has not changed, even if I think that almost all countries are aware of what's happening. That's why I thank you organizers so much, because with passing of time, I must confess that my enthusiasm has waned because I couldn't make the difference with a so increasing indifference feeling towards this so-called phenomenon that in reality is made up of thousands of human lives where rights are constantly violated. Now, I tell you that COPEM is ready to cooperate to projects and initiatives that are maybe just a very small drop in the ocean, but let us feel at least less insensitive towards a tragedy that is really using the word of a priest that is trying to host lots of people in Syracuse, lots of illegal immigrants in Syracuse. He defines it from what has been told to him from testimonies, really a genocide of a continent. And I must stress, as others before me have told, you don't risk your life in a so dreadful travel among the desert, across the sea, without reason. You don't choose where to be born. Why couldn't you choose where to emigrate if you want to improve your life? Either if you are a refugee and you need to do that, either if, as Mr. Samaritano says, you want just to improve your life condition, to give a better situation, economical situation, to your family and to your children. So I totally agree with what was said before me by Ms. Del Re. We must invest in finding other solutions, but we must do it fast. And cooperation development should, in my opinion, involve more directly third countries, the so-called third countries. And what I experienced working on EU-funded projects is that sometimes bureaucracy that's behind those projects is so difficult that it's a bit hard to have lots of sub-Saharan or non-European countries, apart the ones that are like Turkey and other countries very used to work on Euro-Mediterranean, to work on EU projects. So it's very hard for them to fill all the documents. If you are talking, for example, with a local authority that it's trying to make the situation of citizens better when their lives are so poor, when there is war, when there are water emergencies and other emergencies. So let maybe this bureaucracy be less, and let facts be more of impact. Let we find together, we are of course an international organization, but I think that governments can do that. They can talk together. Let's talk about human corridors, about developments, about circular migration, but let's also make that all the procedures, both to cooperate and to participate in European projects coming from South African countries, and also the procedures for migrants willing to come to Europe legally and having all the titles to do that, because there are a lot of people that have degrees from university and then they come here illegally and they have no recognition of their title. And of course, they again suffer poverty in Europe as well and are exploited. We all know which the situation is, so let's think what can be done and let's involve the governments, because the final word about migration, we can sensitize them, of course, it's a very important role, but migration is competence, as we all know, of governments. Thank you, thanks to all of you. Very sorry, Mr. Basha, that the system didn't allow us to see the video. Maybe
well, actually, our team there can share your video, which you have sent right now.
Okay, just send the last one because maybe I took too much time. So the second one.
I will. It will be good to show the video because we have enough time. Because we have spoken about the video, so the people to see it, you know.
Okay. So
and
thank
then I
you.
will give the floor to Professor Aydan.
So you're so kind. Thank you, Sabina, for your support.
You are
So
welcome.
there's a first video, number 1. You can show it if you want. It's 3 minutes. Let me see if we can hear also.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Of course.
Quante persone morte? Io, mio fratello in Somalia è morto.
Va a finire che la gente parte lo stesso e muore nel deserto. A me ragazzi mi hanno raccontato che nel deserto non c'è la paura che possono perdere. Penso che possa nascondere il fatto che le
Sorry for these technical issues, but it's the work, it's an effort that has been done by Ilya. I wanted to show it. Sorry by taking your time.
Maybe what happens is that Zoom doesn't support this format. Maybe videos are too heavy.
Sabina, what is going on?
Actually, the video which is sending it has sometimes it's sound, it gives the sound, but sometimes it's just it doesn't work. It's not about the Zoom actually.
Okay, let's we will send a video to all the participants, not only the speakers, in addition to the participants of this webinar, soon, just after this webinar conference ends. Now, you know, it's not just European Union. Turkey is one of the countries that is facing the refugee and migration issues by the wars in the world. We have around 4.5 million refugees and migrants in Turkey. And also we are trying to cooperate with European Union to get some resources in order to tackle this big humanitarian problem that we are facing. Almost in most of the cities in the south, the population of the refugees is almost equal to the 25%. And in some cities, almost it over exceeds the population of the local community. Turkey also is playing a big role in the Mediterranean, including Libya. Political developments and also the capacity building of the Libyan government, all of these things are in the interest of the Turkey. Professor Sedat Aybar is the head of the African Studies Center of Istanbul Aydın University. He's a professor of economics and finance, and he's leading the head of the Economics and Finance Department of Istanbul Aydın University. He is very much well known about his African studies, about he says that he developed about the resource in Africa and mainly focusing on Libya. We would like to get his opinion from the Turkish side and how Libya can recover from this crisis and what Turkey experience they can share in order to overcome this problem. Turkey and Libya relations, one of the key factors of Libya crisis, facing similar migration issues and common solutions are his topic. Now the floor is on you, Professor Aybar.
Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here sharing this platform, and I've been listening to the presenters with great interest. You know, I have changed my topic after listening to some of the presentations. I wanted to present African experience in Turkey as a migrant, as you know, what kind of difficulties or what kind of opportunities African migrants are facing in Turkey. We have done a research on this, but I'm not going to talk about it. I think it's going to be available on publication, but I'm going to follow up what Francesco and Ilya was talking about. That yes, Ilya mentioned that what we see the tragedies in the Mediterranean as the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to follow on that, and what kind of policies can be derived in order to overcome some of the problems that we are facing in the Mediterranean. It seems like it is not the Mediterranean the problem, but it goes beyond that. So I'm going to cover some of the issues that that can be pointing at a solution. Well, not necessarily a full solution, of course, but at least give you some picture how I see the problem from this end of the world. Now, I'm not going to take too much of time. I'm going to make two very simple points. In order to make those two simple points, I'm going to present you with few slides, and then I will throw a question. So I'll be speaking as a political economist and economist focusing on development, but also a person who studied Africa for some time. Now, the tragic events that are reflecting on our screens and on the media in the Western world, it's seen in the Mediterranean, as referred to earlier on with other speakers, that concentrates particularly on the passage from North Africa into Europe, and some of the problems that Europe is facing in tackling with these issues. Those are tragic events. And by no means I want to downplay their importance. But in the same time, something else is happening in Africa. Now, before I go into this, let me mention that my view on Africa is not a pessimistic one. I don't follow a pessimistic view on Africa. That I don't see African experience as a tragedy, although that doesn't necessarily rule out that tragedies exist in Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa, and the Africans who live beyond the continent. So now this is, let me see if I could make this turn into a full presentation. I think I could not, doesn't really matter, as long as I can, yes. Well, this is what we see in North Africa into passage into European Union, causing many problems in the EU, such as rise of nationalism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, all sorts of stuff. And Libya is one area through which some of the migrants experience their tragic events. But this is one picture. In fact, what is going on in reality, within Africa, there is a huge intra-African migration going on, which cannot be viewed independent from what is happening in the Maghreb region in North Africa and the passage from North Africa into the EU. Something is happening in Africa that is a rapid change in economic development, and that rapid change is started with some newly emerging economies coming into Africa as large investors, such as China, Brazil, India, Turkey, what have you. Now, they claim on African resources, and that many of these African countries depend on raw material exports. It started to generate some positive returns to the continent, and that has created high economic growth in Africa, particularly during the beginning of 2000s and into 2010s. That is, as a result of this, stratification of the African societies started to become much more diversified. A middle class was on the rise, and their claim on world production is increased. Now, the numbers that we are talking about is around 400 million in sub-Saharan Africa. These are consumers, African consumers, who could consume whatever produced in the world. So this is a huge market. And as this newly emerging or rising middle class was taking its position within African societies, that process is accompanied with something else, and that something else is global warming. Global warming led to loss of livelihood for many African farmers, who started to move into urban areas. So there is a huge rural urban migration within the African continent that is intra-African countries migration. Around that, the amount of tragedies experienced is probably belittles what is happening in the Mediterranean. Now, this rural urban migration and rise of urban areas, rise of African middle class cannot be evaluated independent of what is happening with the migration into Europe. So there is one needs to develop a view that these two phenomena are interlinked. Now, this is what we see intra-African migration, that from low-income countries towards high-income countries, there is a people mobilization, particularly from rural areas to urban areas, which puts urban areas under extreme pressure, and that leads to rise of urban poverty in the continent. So this is who is migrating from where to where. From some of these countries, Burkina Faso to Cote d'Ivoire, this is the largest intra-African migration. From South Sudan to Uganda, nearly 1 million people migrated from South Sudan to Uganda. Mozambique to South Africa. If you remember, at the end of ANC, there was a migration from South Africa into Mozambique that is now reversed, that South Africa receives Mozambican migration, which is also around 1 million people. Sudan to South Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire to Burkina Faso, Somalia to Kenya, Somalia to Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. So this is like this is something that we don't really work on when we study migration from Africa into the EU. This is a fundamentally interlinked situation with what is happening in in African migration. Now here, I think these are my last slides. Countries with largest number of immigrants, and this is a 2017 UNCTAD calculation. The dark green line shows stock of immigrants from outside Africa. South Africa receives a lot of non-African migration. So it is not only Africa gives out migrants, but also Africa receives migrants from abroad. Cote d'Ivoire, these are South Africa and Ivory Coast. These are relatively rich countries. Uganda, high growth country, as well as Nigeria. Look at what happens with Libya. Libya is the largest. There are a lot of migrants from African continent, that is intra-African migration, but Libya receives much higher numbers of migrants from outside African continent, and that is Libya stands out, and it can be singled out together with South Africa, that these are countries receiving migrants from outside African continent. So, this basically, this is what I wanted to, those 2 points I wanted to make. One, migration from Africa it has its interlinked aspects with intra-African migration. Urban poverty, urbanization is a big problem and big phenomenon. Also, rise of middle class in sub-Saharan Africa is an important determinant of the migration issues, and how complicated the situation is can be traced from those stratification of those societies. Now, to solve this, investing in Africa, helping Africans, or generating some schemes in order to tackle these issues will never be sufficiently enough. So what is needed is much more radical, much more broader policy measures, such as removing, for instance, common agricultural policies, some of the EU restrictions on African imports, some of the restrictions imposed by the United States on some of the African nations. These are known as CATSA stuff, or what Donald Trump is removed, that some countries are favored by during Barack Obama period in order to develop much more interrelated or integrated production chains. So these are some radical and broader and deeper economic relations with Africa would enable us to overcome some of these problems. Plus, probably I should add one more, that is cooperating with China. I think Ilya mentioned about third parties, cooperation in sub-Saharan Africa. China comes in as a big investor, particularly into infrastructure. So these could be put forward in a much more rational, logical manner than building up a Frontex, pushing migrants back and pushing people into hopelessness. Can be tackled by developing some of these policies, long-term policies. Thank you very much. This is all I wanted to say.
You're welcome, Professor Aybar. In a short, you summarized what has been spoken, during the conference about the solutions. We have some questions about what steps have to be taken in order to overcome this migration problem. And there are different opinions from the speakers. For example, Mr. Samer Al-Ghazbi, the head of the STACO NGO, offered an international conference. I have an offer to COPEM, for example, to its migration committee, to take care about this organization of such a conference, where we will involve also the NGO community and the international organizations, where we can discuss all of these issues and focus on the solutions. The idea of Professor Aybar, Mr. Samaritano, and Ilya to invest in the southern countries in order to make more attractive their countries, to promote their economies, and to reduce the reasons of the migration is a good idea that I am sharing also as a moderator of this webinar. The idea also to involve northern funds in order to develop the southern countries, it is a great idea, and it's one of the solutions, because people, one of the main reasons that people move from Africa to Europe is the economic situation that they are facing, and that is the democracy and the political situation they are facing. And of course, it creates a security problem for them, a future problem for them. In brief, the outcome of this conference is to, in order to tackle this problem, we need to help more Libya primarily and all the African countries. So to solve the problem in the in the source countries, not in the host countries. And also temporary solutions like the European Union is developing to provide funds and to develop policies like barriers for the migrants is not working forever, you know, because there are temporary solutions and they are not humanitarian solutions to confine people in different camps, and to send them back to Africa is not the solution. Next day they are coming again. Like you remember, we have faced the case in Morocco last week when the Moroccan government opened the borders. You remember what happened in Gibraltar. In order to not face similar problems, we need to develop long-term policies in order to solve the problems of the African people of the poor countries, and to assist them to develop their capacity and to level the poverty issues on a humanitarian base. Thank you, all of you, for participating to this conference. Once again, I apologize for the technical problem we faced with this documentary. Sorry, Ilya, I don't know who is the responsible, but I was very keen to see this documentary, to present this documentary here. And I hope to see you in another conferences. And also I wish success to Mr. Samaritan and Ilya for the general assembly that they will have tomorrow. And also I express our solidarity to STACO in Libya, to support them until the end in order to promote their capacity and to solve the problems that Libya government is facing. Turkey, European Union, China, whoever are the third parties also, they need to focus mostly to the internal issues of Libya and not to interfere from their own interests, but for the interests of the Libyan people. Otherwise, this problem will be more tragic, and expecting the elections in December, and let's hope Libya has a united government after the elections, and all of us to cooperate with those people in order to prevent more migration and also to help the source countries to tackle the issues by themselves instead of exposing them to the entire world. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope to see you again soon.